This NHL Action Network collaboration is presented by Bet365. Download the app or visit bet365.ca for the latest odds. And find out why it's never ordinary at Bet365. Must be older than 19, available in Ontario only. Please play responsibly.
It is time for another NHL Action Network collaboration. Nick Alberga and Pete Jensen with you. And shout out to our good friends over at Bet365. Loving life right now and loving the plays this week as well. Pete, what's going on, buddy?
What's up, Nick? Yeah, big thanks to Bet365. It's the holiday season. We're really excited about this episode before the league breaks for a 3-day holiday hiatus this coming weekend for Christmas Eve. But yeah, great big picture storyline time this time of year, right?
It is, and tell you something, I'm excited to have today's guest for the first time ever here on this collab and many more ahead. It's Tim Kalinowski from the Action Network. Timmy boy, what's going on, buddy?
Nothing much. Great to be here, fellas. From my handicapping standpoint, when, me, Nick Martin, and Michael Leboff do our show, I'm the guy that wants to talk all the macro league, gossip, rumors, and, Nick wants to get right down to the numbers. So I'm happy to come here and start with a little macro league talk because I'm a sports radio guy. That's what I like. That's the fun for me.
That. Big Chem guy as well. That's fantastic. We're like the brand new Legion of Doom line for back in the day with the Philadelphia Flyers. Love to see that. With that in mind, perfect correlation. Craig Berube's a former Philadelphia Flyer, now the ex-head coach of the St. Louis Blues. Why don't we start there? What's your read from a betting standpoint on the St. Louis Blues? Last time I checked, this happened in-season coaching change. They did something pretty substantial, didn't they?
They did. And I'll tell you this, I don't think they're going to win another Stanley Cup off of this, but I think that from a betting standpoint, this whole, new coach bounce. And for me, I feel I'm always walking on eggshells, especially being, younger guy. Like, do I feel like a square if I'm just saying, back this team, they have a new coach, like they should turn it around. But we continue to see time and time again, it actually works, at least for, a short-term sugar rush. So I wasn't high on St. Louis this year to start. And now even with this, I think I'm kind of going to stay away from, what's going on here and wait for it to kind of die down. And for what I think the St. Louis Blues to go back to being, a version of the St. Louis Blues we saw under Berube.
And I think when you look at from a prop standpoint too, Tim, there's a lot of opportunity here. People are still not waking up to the fact that Torrey Krug's getting going again offensively. Jordan Kyrou, one of the lowest shooting percentages in the league for the season at large. We all know there was a little dysfunction there, right, between him and Berube, some tears shedded, right, some no comments thrown his way, but the bottom line is Kyrou is their best player, and I think he has a lot more to give than what he has so far this year from a goal scoring standpoint. Power play, especially for that team, has been at the basement of the league in that category.
No, I tend to agree. And what I would also say is you look at their schedule coming up, it doesn't get easy. I mean, they have Chicago sandwiched in here, but they're going to be playing some teams that, from a betting perspective, we'll look at when the line drops on some of these games, what the books think of the St. Louis Blues turnaround and the bounce. Because at the end of the day, we bet numbers. And if they tell us that if we think they start overvaluing them, that's when we go try and chop in and fade them.
Tell you something, the tiers to 60 is through the moon right now for Jordan Kyrou after that episode following the departure of Craig Berube. The one thing, Tim, I would look at with St. Louis, and it seems to be a theme with a lot of teams who make a coaching change, is they really buckle things down defensively. So I wonder if the unders start hitting a bit more, and that has been a theme throughout this season with the St. Louis Blues, if you recall that start. Would that be an angle you'd consider playing at the very least?
I would consider it, but at the same time, the teams that they're playing coming up here, I look at Tampa Bay. They don't play great defense, and they put the puck in the net. Colorado, they put the puck in the net. They've struggled in that. Pittsburgh, they're a high-volume shooting opportunity team. So it really depends on the number, and it sounds good, but I still profile the St. Louis Blues as a team that, should score goals and can be leaky defensively. So I'm not going to make a full on change in my assumption about this team. And especially with matchups going forward. I mean, they play Chicago, like I said, sandwiched in here. That's a high event team. Dallas, no Ottinger. like I'm hoping that these numbers maybe dip these totals, and then I can grab some overs, because it wasn't left to bet overs in hockey. I mean, come on.
True.
I really wanted to get to Jake Ottinger being out week to week. I feel like it could present a buy low opportunity betting wise for the Dallas Stars, whether it's to win the Central Division at the end of the day, because hopefully he's not back. Hopefully he's not out for too long here, but maybe even for Stanley Cup futures if the number dips a little bit. But I think, Tim, when you look at the way Dallas has been playing, even prior to Ottinger's injury, I mean, over the past 14 games, they have the second most goals allowed behind only the St. Louis Blues. So that's not a good look right there, now losing Ottinger.
No, and I love this Dallas team. I really do. I think that they have, Stanley Cup DNA to them. But again, here I look at the schedule. They go Seattle, who's been yuck. They have St. Louis, a back-to-back against Chicago, or, not back-to-back. They play them twice in a row, and Montreal. So if you're saying the futures market for Dallas here, I don't think that they, just looking at this in front of me, I don't think that they're going to dip that far, because it's all about timing, right? So you lose Ottinger, and then you get a gauntlet of, like an Edmonton or a Calgary, one of those West Coast trips. You're like, okay, this is where they could really use them. I look at the schedule and it's like, it kind of matches up for them. So they could weather the storm here. The formula what I'm looking at says that they can. And I will say, when you're buying on the futures market, and I've learned this from Leboff and Nick Martin, and that the books are oftentimes a little slow to react to these types of things. So say Dallas does weather this storm, that number might not shift like it would a college football or an NFL number that we see, shift by the minute. So I think you could kind of be patient on it. But if you really like Dallas, I would look at the schedule and say, I don't know if they're going to dip. I don't foresee a horrendous dip.
Put it this way, is there better value in a team like the Winnipeg Jets in that Central Division? Connor Hellebuyck has been a great story. I think he's inching closer and closer to Thatcher Demko. Again, a lot of racetrack remaining, obviously, in this season, but Hellebuyck's surrendered 2 goals or less in 10 straight appearances. The Winnipeg Jets, are you a believer in that team, Tim?
Huge believer in the Jets. I love the Winnipeg Jets. My worry is goal scoring with Kyle Connor. He was such a major part of what they do offensively. And we know in this league, you need to score. And, that's why goal scorers get paid. So for Winnipeg, I don't mind buying on them because, again, I also think that's a team that has Stanley Cup DNA. But what worries me about them is, and I always use the Toronto Maple Leafs as the example for this, how they just outscore so many of their problems, right? They're just a juggernaut in the regular season, because when they go play, if they get to overtime, they play 3-on-3, it's ball game, right? So I don't know that if Winnipeg can, score their way out of trouble with no Kyle Connor. Again, that's something that when he comes back, the number that you would want to buy on could still be there.
And speaking of numbers here and Stanley Cup contenders, we mentioned Dallas earlier. They have the same odds to win the Cup as New Jersey. I would lean more towards Dallas there, to say the least, after New Jersey with an absolute stinker at home against the Anaheim Ducks, who had previously lost 13 of 14. What's your pulse on the Devils from a future standpoint, whether it's the Metro Division, something, pertaining to Jack Hughes or Luke Hughes, or just the team in general has been a big disappointment this year?
I'll be honest, I have a lot invested in the Devils. I think I have a Stanley Cup ticket on them. I think I have an Eastern Conference ticket on them. I have Jack Hughes to win the Hart. So for my own sanity, yeah, I hope they turn it around. But I'm more pessimistic about teams. That's like naturally where I come in. And so when the Devils were, kind of going through this skid or struggling, goaltending wise, defensively, I was saying to Nick Martin, I'm like, oh, Nick, this team sucks. Like, it's all over. It's done. And he's like, listen, they're still offensively as good as it gets. Or, that's why, again, funny enough, like Toronto, I think the Devils, we should be looking to buy on, to be honest, because at least regular season wise, they could still outscore a number of their problems. I know you pointed to the Anaheim loss on Sunday night. I was on Anaheim in that game, just back to back. I thought it was kind of a tough spot for New Jersey, especially with them being, thinner on the back end. But look, middle of the ice, they're still strong. And don't be surprised if they still outscore a number of their problems. Like, they're going to get ready to play Philly on Tuesday night. Philly is a team that has surprised us all. I love Philly. I think Philly's about as good of a guarantee for a solid effort every single night when you're betting. But here's the head scratcher. They go play Philly. Philly should probably outwork them, and everything should lead to value on Philly. Yeah, but what happens when New Jersey just goes and outscores their problems and Philly can't? So I think I would be interested in buying on New Jersey just because of the firepower. Like, I don't know if I'd grab them Stanley Cup, but in terms of the next couple of weeks, I'd be looking for spots to back New Jersey.
Yeah, I think the Metro in general, guys, is just like not what we expected outside of maybe the New York Rangers. Peter Laviolette, I don't think is getting enough love right now for the Jack Adams. They've had some phenomenal stories up and down that roster. Jonathan Quick's been fantastic. What's your read? You talked a bit about the Flyers, the Islanders. Like Carolina's another team I'd loop into that conversation. Is there value to think maybe to back a team like Carolina to mount some ground here in the second half of the season?
100%. It should be. This is the Carolina Hurricanes have been as, consistent a regular season team over the last, 3-4 years. I'm still looking to back Carolina. I backed them, I think all week. I was betting them last week or the week before. I will say this note about, you mentioned Torts for Jack Adams. I wonder if Philly buys at the deadline now, and will that affect this race late, because they have shown that they deserve more. They deserve help. They deserve a team worth buying in on. And I love watching them. I think they are just, they're a bettor's dream because they continue to be dogs and they continue to, outwork teams. But what happens late? I know that, Briere and Keith Jones have been very adamant that they, this is going to take some time, and that they are not going to overreact to short-term success. So that's my biggest worry about Philly. I personally, because they're enjoyable, would like to see them buy, but if they sell late, does that, make them middle off a little bit?
And with the Jack Adams race, it's worth mentioning now that we're up to 3 coaching changes, you still see a nice little number on Chris Knobloch, plus 3,000. Comparatively speaking, Tortorella plus 1,000 and Laviolette plus 600. And again, Tocchet is the guy that's been, leading that race all season long since Vancouver's hot start. But with Edmonton kind of showing their potential and flashing some pizzazz here, I feel like that Knobloch number presented by Bet365 is certainly worth dabbling in a little bit.
Yeah, and this relates directly to Connor McDavid's heart number as well. He's now a plus money favorite, and it was kind of funny. I think a lot of people had like Oilers award fatigue. Like, we're just going to keep giving all these awards to the Oilers, but they did something so funny by having such a poor start. They lowered the bar back to, they started now they're like graded on a curve to that start. So they've lowered this bar and now they are hurdling it, by 10 feet. So I think McDavid is still by. I think we'll be looking at this race in late January and February and saying, why didn't we grab McDavid when he was still plus money for the Hart? Like, and I could see the same thing with the Jack Adams. You have to understand, I think it was the right mindset going into this, that the voters could have some Edmonton fatigue, but they did a funny thing. They lowered the bar and now they're clearing it. So I feel like you guys will probably, echo that same sentiment of like, we keep giving this to McDavid and then all of a sudden, well, he is like, what was it, like 24 points in 10 games or something like that? It's been insane.
I actually am going to fade, if you can believe it. I'm the biggest McDavid backer you can find. I just think it's like the LeBron effect. Like, conceivably, LeBron could have won the MVP like 15 years in a row, but McDavid has to set the bar so far and above everybody else. So the problem is there's some players having hell of a years. Like, I mean, Nikita Kucherov's getting absolutely no love, except for this podcast and the NHL Fantasy on Ice podcast. The guy's on pace for a career high in points. And Tim, that's going to be probably my reasoning as to why I don't think McDavid's going to win the Hart Trophy. I think McDavid has to get like 200 points. I think he has set such a crazy barometer in the voting perspective. I don't think it's possible this year.
Even when I laid out that
didn't
it reset,
sell me, bud.
Didn't sell you. Well, I think Kucherov. The problem is, how good is his team going to be? Right. Sure. This team has been a head scratcher all season long, and I'm trying to do the classic betting thing of when everyone says a team is done, that's when you buy back in on them. And, this Tampa Bay team, like that's kind of how I felt. And I've been burned by it a little too many times this year. So if I was a voter, I would maybe have my getting burned by Tampa Bay bias in there on the Kucherov situation. But again, how good is this team going to be? I mean, it's those two things you can't overlook it. They are correlated.
No, you're totally right. Like to see Tampa Bay lose in the fashion they did to Calgary is like eye-opening and a reminder that they're just not as deep and strong across the board of a roster as they have been for the past 5 years or so. Tim, when you're looking for the upcoming week prior to the holiday hiatus, you could say, I mean, what excites you the most? I know we got on Saturday, to look ahead a little bit, we got the first Golden Knights Panthers Stanley Cup final rematch right before the holiday break.
Yeah, I love the Florida Panthers. I bet them a couple weeks ago to win the Stanley Cup at, I think it was 18-1, something like that. They profile, like, this is not a fluke where what they did last year. This team is legit. They're a nightmare to play against in the playoffs. I'm salivating at the opportunity to bet them in playoff series because they are built to win that trophy. They are built to go deep in series. What I am interested with this week is the Ottawa Senators, and it's been ugly for them. They've lost 4 in a row. They've lost 3 in a row on this road trip. Are they going to fire the coach? I think we talk about the, new coach bounce. I'm waiting on what's going to happen here in Ottawa because it doesn't get easy for them. They play Arizona on Tuesday. I think I'm going to bet Ottawa in that game, but then they go at Colorado, Pittsburgh, at Toronto, Buffalo. I think, if you've noticed, a lot of these teams, they fire their coach right before they're about to get a soft spot in their schedule. So I keep seeing like Ottawa, I'm like, when's the soft spot to kind of do this? But they're also keep losing. So I'm also too, I like to do as a bettor, like, I'll bet them against Arizona, I think, on Tuesday night and just be like, well, if they lose, at least I can wake up to the coach being fired. And I think, and sort of like have something to hang my hat on. But I've been doing that with Ottawa for, I feel like 3 weeks.
No, it's true. Like the big narrative, because I'm here in Canada, is that the new owner in Ottawa wants stability and doesn't want chaos and panic and disorder around this team. And that's why they haven't made the coaching change. But I mentioned this on the NHL Fantasy on Ice podcast. Like, they're at a point where they have to make a decision. They're going to have to make this change, right? They keep losing and losing and losing. And to your point, this will be the final time I back the Ottawa Senators Tuesday night. Pete knows I love revenge games. Jakob Chychrun, Pete, I know you're going to hit this. He is returning his first game back in Arizona here.
Right, and get on him for a point prop or something.
Yeah,
shots on goal for sure. Even if you see something out there with 3, 4, 5 shots on goal, he's capable of something like that. He's going to be putting a puck on net against his former team. But to go with what you were saying, Tim, that almost sets the table for this to happen, right? The Coyotes traded him away. They seem better off as a result of it. They're going to probably try to stick it to Ottawa and get the coach fired. Not blatantly trying to do that, but like the motivation is going to be there on the Coyotes side as well.
Yeah, I think so. And the Coyotes, our podcast loves the Arizona Coyotes.
We're well aware. Yeah.
Love, we love us some Arizona Coyotes. So it feels like blasphemy when you're saying that you're going to be betting against the Arizona Coyotes. But, I understand the motivation, but Ottawa, and I've been, again, feels like a broken record. They need a game. They need this one. And, you talk about Chychrun, props. Look, same game parlay, Chychrun point, Ottawa win. Like those things are correlated, right? If you would think if Chychrun's on the board, that means, or if Ottawa wins, you would think it's because Chychrun's on the board in some fashion. But I don't know. I'm so interested to hear what other people think of this Ottawa Senators team because they should be so much better. I understand it's a good note, Nick, about wanting stability, but we hear team brass say all the time that they want one thing and then they go ahead and do another. Like this, I don't believe them as far as I can throw them.
Well, you want to know my opinion? They're frauds. I've been saying that for 6 months. I still feel that way. Pete was very high on the Ottawa Senators, and they've done some fraud things this year, and that's why they're up against it. That's why they're going to miss the playoffs yet again. Tim, I don't know if I can sell you on this. So again, I got burned, I think it was last week by the Carolina Hurricanes. I expected a bounce back in Calgary, and then they got torched. But Pittsburgh lost 7 Cobb to the Toronto Maple Leafs on Saturday. They're playing the Minnesota Wild. The thing that does scare me, Marc-Andre Fleury revenge game. He always torches the Pittsburgh Penguins. But I think I have to back the Pens in this scenario. Just there's so much pride in that room. Like they have Mr. I hate to lose, Sidney Crosby. They got Malkin. They got some gamers, some legends, some future Hall of Famers on that roster. Do you expect to bounce back here from the Pens like I do?
It's funny. I am the first to admit, I was saying pre-show to you guys, I got 4 TVs in my living room. Not much. There's not a lot of sports that gets missed in my household, but oddly enough, the Pittsburgh Penguins and the Minnesota Wild are about as 2 big of blind spots that I have in handicapping the NHL this year. I mean, in what world, I know they turned it around a bit, but in what world should the Pittsburgh Penguins power play be 0 for, 37 or whatever it ended up being? So, and at the same thing, the Minnesota Wild, who I liked going into the season, they've been, confusing as well. And I know they've got the new coach Bounce. I'm going to defer to you here because these are as big of 2 blind spots of teams that I have. You cannot back, and this is the thing about gambling, right? The only way to win or profit is we're looking to get ahead of the curve. We're looking to say, hey, I think, your assumption of this team is wrong. And here's why I'm going to bet the other side. I cannot back Pittsburgh until I see the power play humming, like pride in that room, whatever. Score in the damn power play, will you? Like, you got almost 5 Hall of Famers on it. Score.
To comment on Fleury, I actually saw before the pod that he's not playing tonight. So
okay, there you go.
That's a weird thing from new coach
Perfect.
John Hines. Pretty shocking, man. That could have been Fleury's last trip to Pittsburgh.
Yeah, but Gustafson's been on fire on a different planet under John Hines, so you can look at that. Tim, anything else you want to circle before we wrap here?
Yeah, those coaches, man, they are just so weird. Every time you think you understand them, they do something like that. I'll point to this on Tuesday night, Edmonton and the New York Islanders. I'm interested to see what this total opens at. I would love to get an over 6 if it comes that way. The Islanders have been pretty surprisingly an over team this year. It's not what we think of the classic Islanders teams of just, kind of suck the life out of you and then go try and win the game 0-0, as I like to say. But they've been 18-11-1 to the over this year. Edmonton, obviously, they're a high event team, 16-11-1 to the over. So I would love to play an over here. I've been playing some Islanders overs just because they've been it's not what we would think is a classic Islanders team. They continue to do the thing where they go up 3 and then blow the lead. And, we all know that 3 + 3 is 6. So if I could get an over 6 on that, I'd be really happy.
And yeah, you're right about the offenses there. Over the past month, since November 18th, top 2 offenses in the entire league. Did you ever see that coming from the Isles, Nick?
I have not. As somebody who has watched that team for quite a bit of time, I have not, but it's been fun. They're fun to watch. We can go that far, and I do believe in the Islanders. If Sorokin can get cooking, they're going to be a very, very scary team. Tim, this has been a blast. First time ever. There's going to be a second time. I love it.
Oh, thank you for having me, guys. Let's see. Maybe next time we talk, the Ottawa Senators have a new coach. Maybe they don't. I've been saying that for far too many weeks in a row. So thank you for having me, gents. I really appreciate it.
All right, many thanks to Tim Kalinowski from the Line Change Podcast, the Action Network, doing brilliant stuff as per usual. As we shift gears now to a money-making segment on this podcast, it's giving props with Anna Dua. How are you, Anna?
I'm doing good. I have some pretty good picks this week, Nick, so I'm excited.
What's your favorite one? Let's hear it.
Ooh, I'll tell you at the end, but I'll give you all 3 right now. Starting on Monday, I'm looking at the Minnesota Wild Pittsburgh Penguins game and Matt Boldy to find the back of the net. He has goals in 3 of his past 4 games. Pittsburgh coming off of that big 7-0 loss against the Toronto Maple Leafs. So if they're still shaky, maybe Boldy finds the back of the net in this one. Tuesday, the big game that's standing out to me is the LA Kings and the San Jose Sharks, and Trevor Moore for the over on shots. He has 15 shots on goal across just his past 2 games. Sharks are allowing the most shots per game in the entire NHL so far this season. And the big one, I think this is my favorite, on Wednesday, New York Islanders, Washington Capitals. Guys, there's one team this season that Alex Ovechkin has multiple goals against, and that's the New York Islanders. So maybe he lights a lamp in that one and kind of shifts his season around.
I could see it. There's a lot of offense on the other side of the island, right? I wanted to mention this kid, Simone Holmstrom for the Islanders. We were talking about prior with Tim that the Islanders rank second in goals per game behind only the Oilers, who they play on Tuesday. Over the past month of the season, Holmstrom has 9 goals this season and is providing some nice secondary scoring. So I like him. We like the Chychrun prop, right, Nikki? And then,
Yep.
some other good ones on that. That Tuesday slate is loaded, man. There's like 5 different games that I'm drawn to. And I know you heard some good news on the Jack Quinn front for Buffalo.
Yeah, it sounds like Jack Quinn could return to the Buffalo Sabres lineup. Hasn't played this season, of course. So maybe you look at that game. I like the fact you brought up earlier on, Anna. We got the big Stanley Cup rematch game coming up over the weekend, Vegas and Florida. And Tim, who we had on, very high on the Florida Panthers. If only Matthew Tkachuk get going, eh?
He's going to get going soon. There's a lot of these guys that I'm waiting to get going, him and Alex Ovechkin. But my goodness, I just have to say, like, Pete was not having any of this OE praise I had. I just teed him up, and Pete goes straight to the New York Islanders, does not even mention Ovechkin. I'm dying at that.
Well, I mean, he's got some nice chemistry with Dylan Strome and Tom Wilson. I mean, I love Tom Wilson. He's having a career year. He's on pace for like 30 goals this year. So I think I said it on one of the prior fantasy shows. Like, don't be surprised if Tom Wilson maybe not scores more goals than Ovi, but maybe has a better like category profile this season. It would be a little surprising.
You know what? I love the NHL Fantasy on Ice podcast, so make sure to go check out our Week 11 waiver wire edition. We got the Week 11 mailbag edition coming up later this week, and we'll reconvene, I guess, in a couple weeks for another Action Network collab here.
Yeah, it should be great. Also wanted to mention Toronto, New York Rangers rematch on Tuesday. They combined for 10 goals in the first meeting of the season at MSG. This one's in Toronto. Expect a lot of goals as well in that one, especially with as good as Martin Jones has been, right, Nick and Anna? Like, that may not continue, especially with the Rangers having some revenge on their minds.
Definitely would look at that, and many thanks again, Anna. Do a given props. We need that segment sponsored or something. Let's rip it up here. Many thanks to producer Bob Bender, Tim Kalinowski from the Action Network. For Pete Jensen and Anna Dua, I'm Nick Alberga. This NHL Action Network collaboration is presented by Bet365. Download the app or visit bet365.ca for the latest odds and find out why it's never ordinary at Bet365. Must be older than 19. Available in Ontario only. Please play responsibly.